Why remote work is the way to go.
Remote work is not a fad, a privilege, or a temporary workaround. It is a historic shift in how societies organize labor, distribute opportunity, and structure daily life. During the pandemic, hundreds of millions of people were forced into a global experiment that proved, in real time, that a significant share of work can be done just as well or better without anyone stepping into an office. If we know this and the data confirms it, what exactly are we being asked to return to, and who benefits from dragging workers back into cubicles?
How did your own experience of pandemic-era work change your beliefs about what is necessary versus what is just habit or control?
The pandemic proved it works when governments locked down cities and told people to stay home. Many predicted economic collapse and organizational chaos. Instead, vast sectors, technology, finance, administration, education, customer support, consulting, and media pivoted to remote work almost overnight, and the system continued to run. Official data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics show that between 2019 and 2022, remote work exploded across industries and was associated with measurable gains in productivity, not collapse.
If an emergency, chaotic transition still resulted in stable or improved productivity, what might be possible with intentional, well-designed, permanent remote systems?
Productivity, focus, and real work. One of the most persistent myths is that remote workers are lazy, distracted, and less productive. Yet surveys such as Owl Lab's State of Remote Work report that about 62% of workers feel more productive when working remotely and only 11% feel less productive, while 70% say remote work makes focused work easier. Gallup's research shows that even as heavily remote workers logged about an hour less work time per day by 2022 compared with 2019, overall output per worker slightly increased because people could sort into roles better suited to their strengths and work in ways that fit them.
If people can work fewer hours, yet they constantly got forcing them backput, or about redesigning work to respect human limits and intelligence?
Talent without borders, traditional office-based hiring traps companies inside geographic bubbles. Candidates must live within commuting distance or be willing to uproot their lives. Remote work blows up that constraint, allowing organizations to hire from a vastly wider talent pool across regions, time zones, and even countries, giving access to niche skills, diverse perspectives, and specialized experience that local markets cannot provide. This wider net is especially powerful for small and mid-sized companies that cannot compete on salary alone but can compete on flexibility, autonomy, and quality of life.
If your organization could choose from the best people anywhere, why would it voluntarily lock itself back into a smaller, weaker labor pool?
Standing room only. Remote as a magnet in a tight labor market where skilled workers have options, remote jobs act like a magnet. Surveys repeatedly show that workers actively prefer remote or hybrid roles, and many are willing to change employers to gain that flexibility, making fully or largely remote positions far easier to fill and far more attractive. Companies that advertise remote openings experience larger applicant pools, more qualified candidates per role, and stronger retention once people are hired because flexibility is treated as a core benefit, not a grudging concession.
If your organization struggles to hire and keep good people, why refuse the one perk workers consistently say they actually want?
Retention, loyalty, and stability retention is not a mystery. When people feel trusted, respected, and allowed to design their day in ways that fit their lives, they stay. Research on remote workers shows higher job satisfaction, lower turnover, and a greater willingness to remain with employers who support flexible arrangements, which directly reduces hiring and onboarding costs for organizations. Remote work also helps keep people employed during crises, health issues, caregiving responsibilities, local disruptions, because work is not chained to a single physical building.
If loyalty and continuity are valuable, why cling to policies that terminate workers over commuting schedules or arbitrary presence requirements?
Less absenteeism, fewer call-offs. When work is possible from home, many of the classic reasons for calling off traffic problems, minor illness, childcare disruptions, bad weather no longer require absence from work. Telework policies in government and private sectors have been defended precisely because they increase continuity of operations and disaster preparedness, keeping services running when physical offices cannot safely or efficiently open. Workers can log in with a mild cold, care for a sick child nearby, or keep working during a storm, whereas an office-only model transforms every disruption into a missed day.
How many lost days and panic schedule changes disappear if presence meant being online and engaged rather than physically in a building?
The brutal cost of commuting for employees. Commuting is not just an inconvenience. It is an unpaid tax on their time, safety, and health. Remote work removes daily exposure to traffic accidents, dangerous weather, road rage, and chronic stress from overcrowded roads, while giving back 1 to 2 hours per day that would otherwise be burned in transit. Those reclaimed hours can be used for sleep, family, exercise, side projects, or civic engagement, all of which strengthen society far more than sitting in a car burning fuel. Imagine what would it mean for public health and social life if millions of adults got back 5 to 10 hours of weekly time that is currently sacrificed to the commute. More time with their families, more time to rest, create, learn, or exercise.
What would it mean for public health and social life if millions of adults got back 5 to 10 hours of weekly time that is currently sacrificed to the commute?
Financial relief for workers. The financial savings from remote work are not theoretical. They show up in household budgets. Analyses from Global Workplace and similar sources find that employees who work from home can save between about $2,000 and $7,000 per year on commuting, food, clothing, parking, and other work-related expenses. While FlexJobs reports that typical remote workers spend roughly $6,000 less per year than office workers. For many families, that is the difference between constant anxiety and a small emergency fund, between high-interest debt and gradual financial stability. If one simple policy change can give workers a multi-thousand-dollar raise without increasing payroll, any rational and decent business or policymaker would embrace it.
If one policy change can give workers a multi-thousand-dollar raise without increasing payroll, why would any rational business or policymaker oppose it?
Massive cost savings for employers. Office buildings are extremely expensive machines. Rent or mortgage payments, utilities, cleaning, security, property taxes, insurance, furniture, maintenance, and constant upgrades. Studies estimate that full-time telecommuting can save employers between about $11,000 and $37,000 per employee every year when factoring in real estate, utilities, supplies, and related overhead, making remote work one of the most powerful cost-cutting tools available that does not rely on layoffs or wage suppression. For large organizations, these savings scale into millions, even billions, of dollars that can be redirected into research, technology, wages, benefits, or lower prices.
If a CEO announced it can remove a huge recurring cost shareholders demand it will be ignored to preserve the ritual of being seen at a desk?
The politics of office real estate. If remote work is so beneficial, why are so many politicians and corporate voices suddenly anxious to send everyone back to the office? One answer is hiding in the skyline. Office towers, downtown real estate, and the municipal budgets that depend on high property values. Commercial activity and commuter spending generate enormous revenue through property taxes, business taxes, parking, transit fares, and related economic spillovers. When companies downsize or abandon offices, cities face budget shortfalls, landlords face vacancies, and political donors with deep real estate investments begin pressuring governments to restore normalcy, often framing it as concern for productivity or urban vitality.
When politicians talk revitalize downtowns by forcing workers back into offices, whose income are they really protecting, workers or landlords?
Trump's threats and the politics of control. In December 2024, Donald Trump publicly declared that federal workers who refuse to return to the office will be dismissed, attacking an agreement that allowed Social Security Administration employees to telework several days per week until 2029. He called the arrangement a terrible and ridiculous deal and promised legal action to roll it back, aligning with advisors who claim that forcing federal employees into offices 5 days a week and triggering a wave of resignations is acceptable and even desirable. This is not a neutral administrative tweak. It is a deliberate attempt to use job insecurity and fear to crush a proven, efficient model in service of an ideology that equates physical presence with obedience and control. Here are several direct quotes that show Donald Trump exerting authority and hubris specifically around remote work and federal employees. In a December 16, 2024, press conference at Mar-a-Lago, attacking a telework deal for Social Security workers. In a December 16, 2024, press conference at Mar-a-Lago, attacking a telework deal for Social Security workers. If people don't come back to work, come back into the office, they're going to be dismissed. He went on to call the 5-year telework arrangement ridiculous and like a gift to a union. promising, "We're going to obviously be in court to stop it." In a speech during the signing of the Laken-Riley Act, setting a deadline for federal employees to end remote work. If they don't agree by February 6th to show up back to work in their office, they will be terminated, and we will therefore be downscaling our government. Which is something that the last 10 presidents have tried very hard to do but failed. In remarks about his administration's return to office policy and bureaucrats, "We are mandating that they come to work or be dismissed." He added that he expects many will not report for work. So the government becomes a more compact and efficient government, which he said has been our goal for many, many years, to be honest. At a rally describing his broader approach to federal workers and the so-called deep state. Most of those bureaucrats are being fired. They're gone. It should be all of them. In another rally line, "We're stopping their gravy train, ending their power trip and telling thousands of corrupt, incompetent, and unnecessary deep state bureaucrats, 'You're fired. Get the hell out of here.'" Criticizing remote work and teleworking federal staff as unproductive. "We don't want them to work from home because, as everyone knows, most of the time they're not working. They're not very productive. And it is unfair to the millions of people in the United States who are in fact working hard from job sites and not from their homes." These lines are strong examples of him using firing, dismissal, and sweeping attacks on bureaucrats as a show of personal authority and contempt toward remote working federal employees. Unions, telework, and evidence improves recruitment and retention, and enhances disaster preparedness by maintaining continuity of operations. These claims match broader research showing that remote work contributed significantly to total factor productivity growth during the pandemic years. Even as other forces dragged on the economy, and they align with corporate surveys in which a majority of employers cite cost savings and resilience as key benefits. When political leaders ignore this evidence, they are not making data-driven decisions, they are protecting older systems and the powerful interests tied to them.
If unions, workers, and empirical data all point in the same direction, how should citizens respond when political rhetoric demands the opposite?
The myth of collaboration as office only. One of the most overused talking points against remote work is that real collaboration requires physical presence. Yet the modern tools that kept organizations alive during the pandemic, video meetings, collaborative documents, messaging platforms, shared project boards, did not vanish after 2020. They improved. And teams have continued to coordinate complex projects across continents and time zones without stepping into the same room. In reality, unscheduled interruptions, performative meetings, and social interactions loosely wrapped in the language of productivity. Water coolers, gossip, and power plays. Office culture is often romanticized as a warm hub of camaraderie, mentorship, and spontaneous innovation, but workers' lived experience frequently looks very different. Water cooler talk can mean cliques, gossip, exclusion, subtle harassment, forced small talk, and unwritten status games that drain energy rather than create value, while managers patrol the floor to visually confirm busyness rather than measure actual outcomes. Remote work strips away much of this superficial performance layer and exposes what matters: deliverables, responsiveness, creativity, and impact, not who laughs loudest at the boss's jokes.
If the workday is filled with interruptions, surveillance, and social performance, is that really collaboration or just theater to justify certain people's authority?
Managers, control, and the crisis of ego. Many managers who resist remote work are not confessing a fear of reduced output. They are confessing a fear of losing control. In a remote environment, a manager who cannot bully through presence, micromanage by hovering, or hide behind endless in-person meetings must actually manage. Set clear goals. Provide feedback, support growth, and judge people by results rather than rituals. This exposes weak leadership and erodes the status of middle layers whose main function has been performative, oversight rather than real strategic or technical contribution. Managers, control, and the crisis of ego is the idea that a big part of the backlash against remote work comes not from evidence about productivity, but from managers' fear of losing control, status, and identity. When people work remotely, you can't rule by walking the floor, hovering over desks, or equating "I see you in your chair" with actual performance. And that shakes managers whose authority has long depended on physical presence and constant visibility. Research and analysis on remote management show several recurring ego triggers. A perceived loss of control when managers can't constantly see what employees are doing. A hit to status because the visual power hierarchy of the corner offices, people coming to your desk, being the boss in the room, weakens online. A skills gap where leaders who never learned outcome-based digital leadership feel exposed, so they blame remote work instead of updating their management style. This is the section of your essay where you can argue that remote work forces a shift from ego-based management, "I must see you to control you," to competence-based leadership, clear goals, trust, digital communication, and measurable results.
If a manager's value disappears once workers are no longer physically under their gaze, should the solution be to drag workers back to rethink which roles are actually necessary?
Remote work and environmental responsibility. Remote work is also an environmental policy in disguise. Reduced commuting translates into fewer cars on the road, lower fuel consumption, and reduced greenhouse gas emissions, with some studies finding that remote workers can have up to a 54% lower carbon footprint than their on-site counterparts. And that broad adoption of part-time telework could cut U.S. emissions by tens of millions of tons per year. For companies that loudly advertise sustainability, opposing remote work while funding daily mass commuting is a clear contradiction between branding and behavior. Key points you can develop under this heading. Disability inclusion. Remote work removes commuting and building access barriers. Lets disabled workers design their own accessible workspace and leverage assistive tech, making participation possible where traditional offices fail. Caregivers and gender justice. Remote work is essential for many caregivers. Research shows it improves quality of life and allows for more equal sharing of care duties, supporting women's careers and enabling men to step up at home. Rural and excluded regions. In many rural areas, there simply are no local jobs that match people's skills. Remote work becomes a lifeline, the only realistic way to access decent employment without migrating. Age and discrimination. Studies on rural mid-career workers show many older workers are excluded from local labor markets. Remote roles plus training create a pathway back in for people employers overlook. Framed this way, you can argue that forcing a rigid return to office is not neutral, it actively re-erects barriers that remote work has begun to tear down. Deepening inequality for those with disabilities, those who care for others, and those outside major urban centers.
When an organization claims to care about climate and sustainability but demands full-time commuting for roles that could be remote, what does that say about its actual priorities?
Social justice, access, and inclusion. Remote work is not only about convenience, it is about access and justice. People with disabilities, chronic health conditions, caregiving responsibilities, or limited access to reliable transportation often find themselves excluded from traditional office-based career paths. Whereas remote work opens doors by allowing them to contribute without facing daily physical and logistical barriers. It also enables workers to live in more affordable regions instead of being forced into overpriced metropolitan centers simply to be near jobs, reducing geographic inequality and housing pressure.
If remote work expands who can participate in the labor market, why should any society committed to equal opportunity treat it as a temporary indulgence rather than a structural right?
The old system is not sacred. The pre-pandemic office model was not designed for human flourishing. It was designed for industrial control, real estate interests, and 20th century technologies. Workers were concentrated in central locations because information, tools, and communication channels were physically locked inside buildings, but that reality has evaporated. The tools now live in the cloud. And knowledge work travels at the speed of data, not at the speed of buses and trains. The insistence on reviving the old system is less about necessity and more about nostalgia, habit, and the protection of financial structures built around expensive commercial real estate. in the frame that attacks the nostalgic mythology of the pre-pandemic office and exposes it as a historical artifact, not a natural law. You can push several lines here. The office was built for old technology. Offices concentrated people because files, phones, and machines were physically in one place. That made sense in a world of paper ledgers, physical switchboards, and on-site servers. It does not make sense when information, communication, and tools are all digital and accessible anywhere with a secure connection. It served control and real estate, not human needs. The 20th century office optimized managerial oversight, time clock discipline, and central real estate profits, not worker autonomy, family life, or community well-being. Cubicles, open plan layouts, and badge systems are architectures of surveillance and control, not creativity. "We've always done it this way" is not an argument. Treat the nostalgia for bustling downtowns, packed trains, and full parking garages as what it is: an emotional attachment for politicians, landlords, and legacy executives whose power and wealth are tied to that infrastructure. Continuity of habit is not evidence of superiority. It's often just inertia. Crises already proved that the system is optional. The moment offices were forced to close, many organizations discovered that essential in-person routines could be replaced in days. If a system collapses as soon as you stop pretending it's necessary, it was never sacred, it was contingent. Old rituals versus new realities. The ritual of commuting, badging in, sitting at a fixed desk, and attending in-person status meetings is now a cultural performance, not a technical requirement. It persists because it flatters some people's sense of importance, provides visible hierarchies, and sustains legacy business models in commercial real estate. In your essay, this section can directly confront the moral blackmail. Behind Return to Normal, it asks who normal has historically worked for, and why the people who profited most from that system are the loudest voices demanding its resurrection. A sharp framing sentence you can use: if a work system only functions when backed by nostalgia, political pressure, and threats of firing, not by clear benefits and free consent, then it is not sacred tradition. It is institutional superstition clinging to life.
If the only argument for a system is how we have always done it, is that a defense of wisdom, a confession of intellectual laziness and vested interest?
For business owners, a strategic imperative. For business owners, remote work is not charity, it is a strategy. It means lower fixed costs, broader talent pools, stronger retention, built-in disaster resilience, higher employee satisfaction, and a brand that signals modernity and trust, all of which are competitive advantages in markets where talent and adaptability determine survival. Owners who ignore this shift to protect their own ego or appease political pressure are effectively choosing higher costs, weaker hiring, and more frequent disruption over a proven alternative: profit and cost structure. Remote work is one of the few levers that can cut major fixed costs without attacking wages or headcount. Office rent or mortgage, utilities, cleaning, security, parking, office supplies, and on-site perks all shrink dramatically when you go remote first or substantially hybrid. That freed-up cash can be redirected to raises and bonuses, better benefits, R&D, marketing, or simply strengthening the balance sheet. Talent, recruitment, and brand. Remote work instantly turns your hiring from local labor market only into best people we can find anywhere. That means more specialized skills available, faster hiring for hard-to-fill roles, more diversity of background and perspective. At the same time, a remote-friendly policy is now a brand signal. High-caliber candidates increasingly read remote first as a proxy for modern, trusting, non-authoritarian management. Companies that refuse remote work for roles that clearly could be done remotely advertise themselves as outdated, rigid, or control-obsessed. Retention and institutional memory. Every owner knows how expensive churn is. Recruitment, interviews, onboarding. Lost productivity while a new person ramps up. Remote work is one of the most powerful retention tools you can offer. People stay where their lives are respected, where they don't lose hours to commuting, where they can handle family responsibilities without drama, and where they are trusted to manage their own time. How much money and momentum have you silently lost over the last 5 years, replacing good people who left mainly for flexibility? Remote work exposes weak management and rewards strong management. Owners who embrace it are pushed to define clear goals and metrics. Judge performance by outcomes, not hours in a chair. Invest in better tools and clearer processes. That painful upgrade in management competence quickly becomes a strategic edge. While competitors waste time on attendance policing and symbolic office politics, you run leaner, faster, and more focused on results. Engagement question: if your managers can only function by hovering and micromanaging in person, are they an asset or a liability to your future? Strategic message to owners: remote work is not a concession to workers. It is a structural optimization for your business. Clinging to office-centric habits to satisfy ego, nostalgia, or political noise is effectively a tax you're choosing to pay. The organizations that move first, design remote-first systems well, and publicly commit to them will lock in the best talent, lowest overhead, and strongest resilience. As an owner or executive, do you want to be remembered as the person who clung to half-empty buildings or the one who saw the future clearly and moved first? For workers, a line in the sand for workers, the remote work question is about dignity, safety, and autonomy over their own lives. After nearly 4 years of proof that remote and hybrid models can function, demands to return full-time to offices are not about collaboration. They are about reasserting control and shifting costs, time, money, risk back onto employees. Accepting this quietly normalizes the idea that workers' lives are endlessly adjustable to protect buildings, budgets, and billionaire donors, instead of the other way around. Dignity over obedience. For nearly 4 years, workers proved that they can deliver results from home, often under terrifying and chaotic conditions. They kept institutions running while politicians argued and executives hid behind screens. To be told now that this proved competence is irrelevant, and that people must go back to daily commuting so managers can see them, is an insult to that effort and a demand for obedience over dignity. After everything you carried through the pandemic? How does it feel to be told that your only proof of seriousness is showing your body at a desk again? Time, health, and family are non-negotiable. Remote work showed millions of people what it feels like to reclaim their own time. No daily exposure to traffic, crashes, and road rage, more sleep and less chronic stress, more presence with children, elders, and partners. Space for exercise, therapy, civic engagement, or simply rest or forced return to the office is very literally a demand that workers surrender hours of their lives every week back to unpaid, dangerous, exhausting commuting. That is not a neutral policy shift, it is a direct attack on health, family life, and mental stability. If someone tried to take 5 to 10 hours of your week without pay in any other way, would you accept it quietly? Money on the table. Every commute costs money: fuel, transit fares, car maintenance, parking, clothing, and food near the office. Remote work quietly functions like a raise because those expenses shrink. When employers and politicians demand a full return to in-office work without significantly raising pay, they are asking workers to shoulder higher costs so that cities, landlords, and certain executives can protect their old revenue streams and habits.
When you add up your commuting and office-related costs, who exactly are you subsidizing with your paycheck and your stress?
Are you relying on your personal, good relationship with your manager? Or are you building real leverage with co-workers who share your stake in keeping remote work? Drawing the line. For workers, a line in the sand should speak like this: you are not a piece of furniture to be placed where it flatters someone's idea of control. You have already proven you can do your job remotely. Pretending otherwise is gaslighting. Agreeing to full-time returns without protest teaches employers that your time, health, and money are negotiable downwards whenever it suits them. The line in the sand is simple. Roles that can be done remotely should remain remote or hybrid by default, not as a perk, but as a baseline expectation. You can end this section with a statement like, if you accept that your employer can arbitrarily reclaim your time, your safety, and your family life today, you teach them that anything else can be taken tomorrow. Draw the line now. Refuse to treat remote work as a temporary favor and insist together that it remains a permanent, expanding right wherever it is possible.
How far are you willing to let your daily life be rearranged to preserve someone else's asset values or political agenda?
A call to action. Do not go quietly backward. This is the moment for clarity and courage from both company owners and employees. Business owners. Refuse to waste shareholder money on unnecessary office space when high-quality work can be done remotely. Codify remote or hybrid-first policies, tying evaluations to outcomes instead of chair time, and redesign roles so managers support rather than police. Publicly reject political pressure that demands in-person presence for optics. And align your operations with your stated values on sustainability, inclusion, and innovation. Employees, organize collectively and openly to demand remote or hybrid options wherever the work is genuinely remote capable, using unions, worker councils, or coordinated collective bargaining where possible. Document performance, productivity, and health gains from remote work, and push back against propaganda framed as team building when it really means surveillance and control. Refuse to let threats, whether from politicians promising mass firings or executives mourning empty downtowns, bully you into sacrificing your time, safety, money, and well-being for someone else's balance sheet. Remote work is not a gift to workers. It is the rational evolution of work in a digital age and a rare reform that benefits productivity, public health, the environment, and social justice at the same time. After years of proving that remote work functions, no one should meekly accept being dragged backward into systems that exist mainly to feed real estate markets and political egos, especially when those systems extract so much and give so little in return.
If someone tried to take 5 to 10 hours of your week without paying you, would you accept it quietly?
Folks, even if you are not a remote worker today, this fight still includes you. Maybe your job is hands-on and must be done in person, but your partner's role could move home. Your adult child might land a remote eligible job, or a cousin with health issues could finally work without risking a brutal commute. When remote work wins, it doesn't just put one person on the couch with a laptop. It circulates time, money, and safety through entire families, more hours with kids, less money burned on gas and parking, fewer nights worrying about someone driving home exhausted in bad weather. If you knew that pushing for remote work today could protect the well-being and budget of someone you love tomorrow, would you treat this as only other people's issue? Or as a chance to stand up now for your family as future options? Will you, as a business owner or worker, stay silent while this historic opportunity is rolled back, or will you raise your voice? Organize with others, and insist that remote work remain a permanent, expanding reality wherever it is possible?
You carried through the pandemic, how does it feel to be told that your proof of seriousness is showing your body at a desk again?